Hi everyone and good afternoon. Thank you very much for that introduction. I teach Spanish and Portuguese at Temple University, which is not very far from here, not as far as this. But that also means I don't have an excuse to run back and forth to the office. But you know where this is now. Okay, so as was in the introduction, I mentioned complementing the foreign language classroom, two tools that develop oral production. In our context for foreign language, especially in modern foreign languages, oral production is key. When we work with students, whether they're beginner students or students who are in their senior year after having studied abroad, we work on all of their skill sets, reading, writing, but speaking is particularly complex for a lot of different reasons, and oral production is part of that. So this presentation explores how different tools from the very beginning help students to develop these skills and proficiencies and how they can complement the regular classroom and do something different. So globally with this presentation, I'm going to start off talking about the foreign language context, what that means, how foreign languages are learned. We have a really interesting group of people here. It sounds like a lot of scientists, a few foreign language people as well. And I'm sure, or I'm making an assumption, it could be wrong, but at some point everyone has maybe not formally studied a foreign language, but tried, played with one even in terms of when they're traveling, heard one at a minimum, okay? So we'll go over the foreign language context, and then a brief, and I promise it will be a brief overview of the history of foreign language education. It will be brief, I promise. But especially how that history dovetails with developments in technology and education. And then talk about some realities. I use the word realities, I really mean kind of some of the challenges. Just spin it positively because perspective matters. But some of the challenges, some of the realities of teaching foreign language and developing student oral proficiency specifically. Here are two tools the two tools that I use in the classroom and in this specific component, and then ultimately how they contribute to the global classroom experience and student oral production development. So here's a little bit about this context. For our classes at most universities, and definitely down the road at Temple, our foreign language classes are taught entirely in the target language. In Spanish 1, day 1, every single word they hear is in Spanish. My students, even after a month of class, 2 months of class, if they see me, for example, ordering a pizza, they're like, whoa, you speak English? Like, appalled, shocked, all these things. But that's where we want them. It's the best approach to really maximizing how they acquire a foreign language. And I very specifically say acquire a foreign language because we distinguish between learning language and acquiring language. Learning language is learning, all right, this gato is cat. If I take the AR off the end of a verb and I put an O, I'm using the first person in the present tense and the indicative. Acquiring the language is internalizing those rules and being able to, without thinking hard, use them and apply them. So that distinction for us is really important. We need our students to learn the language, to learn the rules, but it's not the end game. The end game is acquiring. Specifically, I'm talking about Spanish 1 and 2 here. At Temple, it's a 4-credit course. 3 hours a week, they're in the classroom. I put it in quotes, it's the lecture component of the course. It's not at all a lecture, it's just how Temple codes them. But it is an interactive opportunity for students to use the language with the control and the support of their instructor. And they're guided through using the specific vocabulary, specific topics, specific structures to interact, to understand their classmates, to understand their instructors, and then also to make sure that they're understood, all in the target language. And traditionally, we've also had a 1-hour language lab, which is, I'll explore it. It's been an evolution. You sense that word too is a little bit of a perspective twist. So what that language lab, it's not just at Temple, a lot of universities have this extra 1-hour language lab in their programs. And what that lab has been like has really evolved, dovetailing with what has been available with technology. Years ago, and a lot of you, if you've studied foreign language, some of these may be really familiar, amazing, traumatizing, I don't know. But printed workbooks. I still remember even like if you think of the perforated edges that you can rip out, you have to write your name on top of every page, and they're either translations, dictations, repeating the same verb, the same words over and over and over again. When it became more available, particularly more affordable, taped recordings, and that's that image of the language lab where there are just rows of tables like this, students sitting down, and then this headphones and like kind of writing furiously away. Then they go back to workbooks, everything kind of goes back. The online workbooks they're still popular now, and they have tremendous benefits. They can have videos, you can have audio, they're auto-graded for instructors, which is a benefit, and also realistically a limitation. And then now, it sounds really fancy, adaptive learning digital platforms. For example, we use McGraw-Hill Text. Their adaptive learning platforms connect. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's used in science as accounting, alternate areas. And its benefits are that, for example, if a student is doing an area, doing a certain topic, and they're doing very well with it, it kind of just moves them along to say they demonstrated mastery in X. But where students are struggling, it might say, oh, let's give you more questions, so let's send you back to the ebook to read this section again, and then let's build your confidence with more easy questions until you can get to where you need to be to demonstrate an acceptable level of mastery with this. These are all useful tools and useful approaches. They have great strengths. For example, they're excellent with the learning part of language learning. Retention of vocabulary, memorizing grammar rules. But they have this realistic and really essential limitation in that there is no genuine oral interaction. Students don't have to listen to anyone and do something, and they don't have to be understood, ever. So that means that if we're talking about how languages are learned, and they're only acquired through genuine oral interactions, that students only have 3 hours a week. No matter how much support you give them, no matter how much homework, no matter how many activities you give them, there are only 3 hours a week that they can actually move from learning to acquiring a language. And what I wanted to do was kind of see how we can expand that. Because the reality is that these 3 hours a week still have significant limitations. For example, here we have the cognitive load of speaking. A simple question like, what's your name? In Spanish 1, it might seem really easy at first. Oh, what's your name? It's Josh. But they're thinking of the answer to the question. They're thinking of what words they have to use. They're thinking, how do I have to change all of these words to match my context? And they're either consciously or unconsciously navigating the physiological articulations of what they have to do with new sounds and new sound combinations in their mouth. It's a lot to do in one moment. Anxiety. All of these are tied together. But in our own classes, if we ask a question and call on a student, regardless of the language, anxiety is part of their experience. Attention paid to the speaker. In a classroom, if I'm interacting with one person, I'm like, oh, what's your name? How old are you? What do you do? It's a great interaction with that one student, but I, as an instructor, have to make sure that everyone else is getting something out of that. And there are a lot of strategies to do that, but it's impossible to make every single student respond to every single question. And then being able to hear while seated far from the speaker. Earlier when we first started this panel, there was a lawnmower going by, I think. It's just, you're sitting here, you're like, oh, this goes away. But it's a reality of teaching in the classroom. There are lawnmowers, cars, really messed up air conditioners, or not a Temple, no air conditioners, just heaters, even in July. but they're distractions, we'll say. And those are all complications or realities, if I'm going to give it that positive spin, of teaching and making sure the students move from learning to acquiring and developing the oral production. So this 1 hour language lab that's been face-to-face and has used those traditional approaches, I decided to do something new and incorporate 2 different tools and move it from a classroom setting to an asynchronous flexible setting, with this goal to further support introductory level language acquisition and enhance the nature, the frequency, and flexibility of communicative interactions. To do this, I use these 2 tools right here, VoiceThread and Extempore. VoiceThread is it's a platform that is integrated into many LMSs, Canvas, Blackboard, etc. And I'll go through a little bit of the details of all of them. It is not a specifically foreign language tool, but it's used to create a space for interaction asynchronously. Extempore, it's called Extempore, speaking practice app, but it's specifically for foreign language, but I can imagine having actually quite a bit of applications. Here's an example of VoiceThread And we'll see a few students, they all gave permission to be included in this. And in this voice thread we have a prompt. And it says for students, answer the question in the most recent voice thread postings, and then ask a question to the next person. It's like a thread, a sequence of interactions. However, there's this instruction, you can't repeat any of the questions that 3 people asked before you. So they have to go back and listen to at least 3 other people. It's not just listening to me, you're listening to the person before them. Every single person they listen to is input for them. It's information they can receive, information they can practice. And to not repeat the question, they have to pay attention to what that is. So there's a brief, this mouse is stuck to the table, a brief demonstration of what that looks like.
Sí, comí en un restaurante esta semana. Se llama Semi. ¿Estudiaste ayer? ¿Qué estudiaste?
So I ended with a question right there.
No me estudié ayer.
We have another student answering.
Al cine el mes pasado. ¿Qué película viste?
And she answered my question and then asked another question.
Al cine el mes pasado yo vi Jumanji. ¿Limpiaste tu casa esta semana? ¿Cómo limpiaste?
No limpié mi casa esta semana. ¿Comiste en un restaurante esta semana? Wow.
And then the series can just keep going. And by providing these guided questions, it forces students and it guides their type of interaction, the type of vocabulary, and the type of structures that they'll be using as well. So they're not just a free-for-all of asking questions, but they actually have the scaffolding and the support to be able to do it in a productive way. VoiceThread's amazing because it can allow students to interact with each other asynchronously, which is, again, really important. I don't want their only exposure to Spanish to be my Spanish. They have to listen to each other, they have to listen to other people's ideas, and even use this opportunity to get to know each other and create community in the classroom. Extempore is another really powerful tool for language teaching, but it's different because it only creates interaction between me, the instructor, and then each student individually. They never see what each other produces, which is important because there's also less pressure with that. Each student, well, I'll go through an example over here. This student, their name and there's a video here hidden because to not include them, but I asked the question. Their instructions here to say listen and answer the question. They have no
video, right?
Yes, and they see a video of me posing this question. And it's not written anywhere. They have to be able to understand what I'm saying. They can't. There are no captions. There's nothing that they can put into a translator. They have to listen. And then I don't even have to play it. But then they simply answer the question. And there are all kinds of controls I can use in this context, where I can say, oh, you can listen to me once. You can listen to me twice. You can listen to me 3 times. Or I can say, you can listen to me once. You have to respond, you can record it once, and you have to respond in 10 seconds after my recording ends. Or you can record and listen to it 10 times and record your answer 10 minutes later, depending on what my goals are as an instructor. But this is another great way to create a space for students where they know no one else is listening to them. They can take risks, they can do more work individually in terms of their own progress. So these tools come together to address some of these realities that I mentioned with the challenges of developing true language acquisition and oral proficiency in the classroom during those 3 hours. One of the realities that I mentioned is the cognitive load of speaking. And here I said when there's more controlled reception, students can provide and develop more focused production. So like I said, if they can listen multiple times, if they can listen, step back, reread parts of their chapter, or look over different things that we've done in class, then they can produce with less stress cognitively, or less cognitive stress for them. And it's all tied together, but greater flexibility also allows them to take away and control and manage some of the anxiety that is tied to production and to speaking. They don't have to do it ever in front of anyone. Sometimes they do it, or a lot of times in the videos you'll see they do it in front of their pets. Who wouldn't really though, let's be real. I mean, but they can do it in the privacy of their own home. They can do it in a crowded cafe where they're effectively an anonymous person, not one person, on the spot. the attention paid to speaker. Everyone has to do everything effectively. In a class, I go on and I select and I pick my students. They don't really get to volunteer ever. I pick everyone, but you can't pick equally every student every time the class is just, or I can't at least. I don't know. But this way, every single student is doing the exact same type of work. It's really great for looking at more systematically how our students are developing. And then also being able to hear the speaker while seated potentially farther away. Students have more control. They can sit and listen with headphones. They can do it in a quiet room. They can just kind of control for mitigate these factors. So how does this go back to the classroom, those 3 hours that I was talking about before? How does it complement the classroom? It creates this online asynchronous program and system creates a space effectively for practicing and enhancing their oral development on their own. But then it goes and it develops and strengthens their oral production skills. They're more comfortable. They've internalized, like I talked about, moving some of that language, the rules from learned to more naturalized speech. Slowly, and not perfectly, but that's not our expectation. It's a process. They go to class more confidently because of this. They've already practiced a lot of this. They've done it. They've gotten feedback from it. And then because they have more skills, they have greater confidence, then they're just globally more willing not just to interact and raise their hand or try to answer me in class, but classroom interactions between students are also more productive. They're more willing to take risks. They have more language just prepared to effectively be produced. And it's been so far a really positive impact. It's just the last year that we've been doing this. It is not without its challenges. I'm sure anyone who's been using any tools that are like this, they're the students, I can't get this to load, I can't get this to work. Training faculty has been a challenge and a realistic effort that we've had to put a lot of work into, but I'm excited about where it's going and look forward to any advice or comments that you can share with me. So thank you.